Hello there. Welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, and today we're talking about a form of plant propagation that is 100% natural, even though it doesn't look it, but is extremely rare in most plants. There are a few plants that do undertake this form, and it's called Vivipary. Vivipary. Okay, and it's the production of plantlets on the plant before normal. So the seeds germinate on the plant. So instead of producing fruit with dormant seeds, these plants, under certain conditions, can allow the seeds to germinate while they're still attached. The miniature plants are called plantlets or pups, and they achieve a larger size before being thrown out to the environment to survive on their own. So it's a bit like giving birth to live young as opposed to eggs in animals, which is the exception rather than the rule in plants. These small plantlets normally drop onto the ground to begin their life as their own independent plant. Obviously, the advantage of that is that they get a head start on plants that are forming from seed. The disadvantage is that they can't go dormant if the conditions aren't correct for them, and also they can't be dispersed far from the mother plant, whereas a seed, let's think about something like a dandelion seed or a maple seed, it can travel in the wind for a long distance. The plantlet doesn't fall far from the plant. Could be a really rubbish phrase. So Vivipary can currently only be induced in those species where it's known to occur in nature. However, more and more plants are being found to be able to grow and germinate viviparously, and many of them are hydroponic. So that's why I'm talking about it today, and there are some notable examples. There is also false vivipary, and we'll talk about that. So normally this doesn't happen because the seeds and the fruit tissue particularly contains high levels of the hormone ABA, or abscisic acid, but plant scientists normally like to just refer to ABA because it's not just involved in the process of abscission. So ABA is a small molecule that inhibits growth and particularly inhibits germination. And normally this is why the seeds don't germinate when they're in the fruit. That's why when you have, let's think of an example, a pear, the pear seeds that don't germinate inside the fruit, you have to wash them, remove the ABA and dry them, and then soak them in water again. And that's why they germinate. So scientists have actually been able to produce mutant plants with reduced synthesis of ABA, and these mutants often exhibit vivipary. So that's one of the findings from these low ABA or no ABA plants. These low ABA plants will also be extremely sensitive to stress because ABA is the stress hormone. While it's quite uncommon in flowering plants, the normal fruit and veg type plants, it is quite common in conifers. So a number of conifer species, you'll find that the seeds will germinate inside the cones, especially if they've been exposed to water or laid on the floor for a long time before the seeds have been allowed to be released from the cone. And when you find this in a plant that's not particularly common to it, it's normally because they've been grown outside in high moisture conditions. So we'll talk about one particular example. The houseplant Kalanchoe, it's like a really succulent houseplant with bright flowers. They will produce little plantlets on their leaves as well. That's a type of asexual cloning vivipary. That's extremely rare, and you'll only get it in certain plant species. You won't find it on other plants producing these little plantlets. Onions, anything in the onion family, you might find little bulbils where there should be flowers. I think that's classed as false vivipary, but you'll find it on chives. There's actually a variety called char-char chive. And on char-char chive, it's very common, and that's what you actually purchase it for, is the little ornamental bulbils and little plantlets on the top. It looks cool. It looks ornamental. Mangroves are particularly prone to vivipary, and you can imagine a mangrove swamp is one of the harshest environments for a plant to grow because of that salt water and the tides and things like this, and getting established into the the mud I won't really call it soil, is really difficult for a plant. So to get going on the plant, the mother plant, for some time and then actually be released is actually a big evolutionary advantage in mangroves. There's a couple of other succulents that have got scientific names. Frucaria fetida. Doesn't sound nice because it's got fetida in the name. That means it's got a horrible smell. We talked about the alliums. What else can we say? Venus flytrap. Lots of carnivorous plants produce viviparous seeds, and it's very common. So imagine these plants live in, again, harsh environments and bogs where there's not much nutrients. And so to just feed off that mother plant for a number of months is actually quite useful. And if you Google Vivipary, there are a number of examples. And one of the particular examples is tomatoes seeds that are germinating from the inside the tomato. This will be a low ABA mutant normally that's occurring there. You'll also find legal cannabis seeds germinating on mother plants viviparously. And where this has happened, I saw one example. It was in eastern Australia, and up in the northeast of Australia. We think of Australia as being this dry, desert-like environment, but up in the northeast, it's actually a rainforest, a jungle, and so it's extremely wet. And this legal cannabis plant it's been so wet and moist in the rainforest, the seeds germinated in the flower, and so the roots are appearing. Don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. There might be situations where that is a good thing. If you can think of them, let me know. But certainly it looks like a very, very strange flower, one of the strangest flowers I've seen. So yeah, the northeast of Australia, one of the places I'd love to go. When I was a child, I used to have the CD-ROM. Can you imagine there's CD-ROM of Bush Tucker Man, who was a ethnobotanist, and he had these like short little video clips. He had a TV program as well, and he'd teach you all about the plants of northeastern Australia in the bush. He was ex-special forces, or probably was special forces, and SAS, and he would teach all the special forces people how to survive in the jungle on the food and things like that. So I found that really interesting. And I always remember this one plant. He was like saying, he said, the Aborigines used this to induce an abortion. When they had an unwanted pregnancy, the women would take the seeds and they put it in a bowl of water, and the ones that floated were safe to use, and the ones that sank, I don't know what accent that is now, the ones that sank were poisonous, and the ones that floated were safe to use. And then at the end, he said, and this would abort the fetus, but more often than not, you'd end up aborting yourself. I was like a 12-year-old. I was like, what the hell? Yeah, so it was pretty hardcore, this ex-SAS guy. But yeah, back to the subject at hand. Vivipary occurs in northeastern Australia because it's so humid and hot. So the illegal cannabis plants love the conditions, but if they're not getting mildew because of the high humidity, the seeds will germinate. Another reason to control your humidity if you're growing legal cannabis. You might induce unwanted vivipary. It's the word of the day. It's been Hydroponics Daily's subject word today. If you've had viviparous plants in anything that I have not mentioned, then please get in contact with me, and I'm more than happy to do a follow-up and shout out in a future episode. If you know somebody who's had viviparous crops, share this episode with them. Until tomorrow, thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.